I was on a long trip through India, and by chance we also got to Jodhpur. Jodhpur is dominated by two big architectural structures. One is the old fortress, Mehranga Fort, and the other one is Umayyad Bhawan Palace. We went there for tea, and we were puzzled who built this palace, why was it built, when was it built, but there were no information. So I sort of got into the palace. I got to know the Maharaja. I got to see these paintings around. I started to become interested in this artist who had done that. I was interested. It was there, and it just waited, in hindsight, it just waited to be picked up, the story.
Halo, tu Warszawa i wszystkie rozgłośnie Polskiego Radia. Dziś rano o godzinie 5:40 oddziały niemieckie przekroczyły granicę polską, planując pakt o nieagresji. Bombardowano szereg miast. Za chwilę usłyszą Państwo komunikat specjalny.
A więc wojna. Z dniem dzisiejszym wszelkie sprawy i zagadnienia schodzą na plan dalszy. Całe nasze życie publiczne i prywatne przestawiamy na specjalne tory. Weszliśmy w okres wojny. Wszyscy jesteśmy żołnierzami.
Pierwsi uchodźcy polscy poprzez Rumunię, Węgry, Jugosławię, Syrię, Irak, Japonię dotarli do Indii. A jeżeli już do Indii, to oczywiście tam, gdzie była polska placówka, polski konsulat, czyli do Bombaju. Bombaj, Indie były traktowane przez większość tych naszych rodaków jako państwo tranzytowe. No, plan był taki, że tutaj mieli w jakiś sposób oczekiwać na możliwość przedostania się poprzez port w Bombaju na statek, który miał ich dalej zawieźć do punktu docelowego, którym najczęściej była szeroko rozumiana Ameryka. Ta kolonia polska tutaj, licząc od przełomu 39 i 40 roku, zaczęła drastycznie rosnąć. W tej grupie był praktycznie rzecz biorąc cały przegląd społeczeństwa polskiego, od profesorów poprzez inżynierów, artystów. Wśród nich między innymi Stefan Norblin ze swoją małżonką Leną Żelichowską.
Stefan Norblin, kiedy przyjechał do Warszawy, pierwszą swoją wystawę miał właśnie w gmachu Towarzystwa Przyjaciół Sztuk Pięknych, czyli Zachęty, w którym się znajdujemy, i potem właśnie tutaj wystawiał jako członek Zachęty. Lata po odzyskaniu niepodległości były oczywiście bardzo trudne, ale jednocześnie pewna nawet euforia, zachwyt z tego, że nareszcie Polska jest niepodległa, przejawiło się w bardzo bujnym życiu artystycznym, zwłaszcza w stolicy, gdzie powstawały liczne kabarety, rewie, powstawało wiele kawiarni, słynna kawiarnia ziemiańska na ulicy Mazowieckiej.
Skarby me, ojczyzna i ty, tęsknoty dwie, dwa czarowne sny.
W roku 1933 poślubił Lenę Żelichowską, początkowo artystkę baletu, kabaretu, a w drugiej połowie lat 30. także bardzo znaną aktorkę filmową. Budując swoją willę, chciał, żeby obok powstało atelier filmowe.
Za mną w ślad będą szli dwa skarby me, dwa Warszawa i ty.
My name is Andrew Norblin. I am the son of Stefan Norblin and Lena Żelichowska Norblin. My parents left Poland in September of 1939 at the onset of the German invasion. They left everything behind, including the new home that they were building. Although I don't recall all the details told to me by my mother, I do know that she took all her jewelry, as money would now be worthless, and that those pieces would finance their journey eastward through southern Europe and on to Baghdad in Iraq, where my father would spend 1 year painting portraits of the royal family there.
And this is still a mystery. How did he come to India? Interestingly, there is a short article. The famous artist Stefan Norblin and his wife, the actress so-and-so, stop over in Bombay en route to America. So they didn't really intend to stay there very long, but they got stuck there.
This vast, large city of Bombay started off as being just 7 swampy islands. And it was only in the 17th century, in 1661, when the Portuguese, who were then occupying these 7 islands, gifted them to the King of England, Charles II, when he married the Portuguese Princess Catherine. That Bombay's development really started. The British were very wise. They fused the islands together into one landmass through reclamation. Right from the beginning, the British governors offered incentives for Indians to come from all over. But as a result of this, not only did Indians come to Bombay, but people from all over the world. When the Second World War broke out, there were a lot of people who came in from Europe. There were a lot of very talented, creative people who came during that time. They did very well over here.
For an artist, the cosmopolitanism of Bombay must have been incredibly inspiring, because what an artist must have seen, I can just imagine someone like Norblin arriving there, he would have seen different kinds of landscapes, visual landscapes, cultural landscapes, social landscapes, all colliding together. And so you would have had a landscape of Bombay which would have been the neo-Gothic buildings and the Indo-Saracenic buildings, and suddenly the Art Déco buildings, and a kind of sensibility of modernism beginning to interface with colonial icons and colonial images. But also in India, the landscape of tradition was always omnipresent. So this must have been fantastic for someone coming from a modern tradition. I mean, an artist's mind would have been sort of bombarded with incredibly rich sensibilities.
महारानी साहेब आपका गौरव दुनिया में सरताज महारानी साहेब आपका गौरव दुनिया में सरताज सारे रजवाड़ों में सबसे ऊंचा मोरबी कीर्तिमान बासाहेबा मोरबी कीर्तिमान.
We just moved in. Here I got married. My father-in-law wanted to give us a home, so this was a built, and that was whole concept was my husband's, because a young man and he wanted to build the palace is a sort of Art Déco. From a very young age, I lived in that palace. That was my life. And I had 5 kids, age of 26. Unfortunately, I lost my husband at a very early age.
Here is a young modern man who sort of went to school in Europe and then traveled all over America. He was very impressed with the Art Déco period, which had become very popular at the time. So when he came back, it was like a dream. That was his sort of what he'd like to live in.
I came to Morvi because I wanted to see its architecture. Someone has told me that it's a closed property. You can't simply stay there, go there, whatever. That was at the same time when I told His Highness of Jodhpur that I would like to do something about this Polish painter. So I asked him to give me a to whom it may concern letter. And equipped with this letter, I ended up at their doorstep. And of course, immediately someone was coming and saying, no, it's closed. They saw the crest and who had written it, and immediately I was allowed in. And absolutely to my surprise, no one has told me, and I think no one knew at that time, that the palace is full of paintings by Stefan Norblin, by the same artist.
My husband met him in Bombay, and I mean, I was too young because the age gap was about 10, 11 years between me and my husband. It's amazing that I have got a son-in-law. He's Irish. And he said, do you know that this is quite a known painter? And this is, since then we tried to start making inquiry about it, and then we found out that he's quite a well-known person.
If you look at the Morvi paintings, they are very well incorporated with the lighting and with the chimney and all of that. So, I mean, and those things were there before Norblin came, or they came at the same time, but he had to accommodate to these things.
My bedroom, I like it very much with Lord Krishna's there. I like my Lord Krishna.
When I first visited Morvi and I saw the palace as we drove up to it, the first thought that came to my mind was that when it was built, it must have seemed to the local people like an alien spaceship had landed. And as you sort of navigate through the palace and you discover, suddenly you walk into a room, a bar room, which would have been used for entertainment, and you see these beautiful figures by Norblin, which you know, the dancers swaying, and there's a kind of kinetic quality to them, which is incredibly dynamic, but it's cocooned in a completely different world, with completely different sensibilities. And those must have been the inner sanctums, the most private spaces of the rulers.
It's done in a beautiful, subtle manner. One cannot take any objection against it because it's beautiful. And yet he's gone completely wild in the bar rooms or the swimming pool area, where you see the women like almost mermaids with peacocks. Peacock again representing Morvi. Mor means peacock. Then in the dining, he's gone more conservative with the ambadi and the horse with, riding a horse. And yet, he's done a brilliant portrait of my grandfathers. And that is really called traditional painting. I mean, that's really restricted. So it's right from restricted to freehand. I mean, he's literally gone through the whole gambit. It's quite amazing.
But I think what would have been interesting, and I often thought of it as I even saw Noblin's murals there, one wonders what must have gone through his mind in terms of what to represent what the patron sort of so much wanted, or to represent what had seeped through the air into the artist's sensibility about the India that he was seeing and understanding, and the kind of schizophrenia that he must have experienced between landing in Mumbai or Bombay, which was the gateway through which he came, and saw a kind of cosmopolitanism. It almost seems like he created a little bit of Bombay in Morvi.
We used to have lots of foreign guests, especially for Christmas time. Of course, lots of cinemas and lots of music. The life was totally different. It is undescribable. So, can't talk about it much.
Mówiąc o Indiach i o tym ciężkim okresie II wojny światowej, byli ci, którzy w Indiach się doskonale spełnili, którzy się wspaniale realizowali. Stefan Norblin w jednym miesiącu miał wspaniałą wystawę, w najbardziej prestiżowym miejscu w Bombaju, jak również przyszedł na świat jego syn. Stefan Norblin doświadczył, czym są Indie, a przede wszystkim doświadczył, czym jest Bombaj, w którym nawet i dzisiaj niewielu wie, że jest to miasto największej po Miami Beach koncentracji Art Déco.
बाबूजी धीरे चलना प्यार में जरा संभलना हाँ बड़े धोखे हैं इस राह में बाबूजी धीरे चलना प्यार में जरा संभलना हाँ बड़े धोखे हैं इस राह में बाबूजी धीरे चलना
Cinema at that time was a major medium of entertainment. Well, it was the flavor of the time. Art Déco was the flavor of the time. The architect originally was a British gentleman called Ridley Abbott. My father was really more an artist than a businessman, to be honest. He wanted to create the showplace of the nation for Hindi cinema. Consequently, Liberty was born, and the name Liberty because of the time just after independence, entirely and purely for Hindi cinema.
बाबूजी धीरे चलना प्यार में जरा संभलना हाँ बड़े धोखे हैं
Now we come to Ramgarh. The Principality of Ramgarh, Stefan Norblin did quite conservative portraits. This here shows the late Maharaja Itendra Narayan Singh as a young boy. He also did portraits of the Maharaja, apparently the father of this boy, in this way. At the same time, we have very Indian motifs. There are more of these type of paintings in Ramgarh. The most beautiful paintings of Ramgarh are, as you can see, the canvas is in very bad condition. This gives this craquelé look to it. I think it's a very, very beautiful painting. And then you find as well paintings like this. There are two of them. The Ramgarh paintings, to my understanding, seem to have disappeared. And I hear that the paintings are not anymore at Ramgarh House in Patna, and nobody knows where they are. So probably my photographs are the only records of these paintings.
Jodhpur is a historic town in Rajasthan, founded by Rathod king Rav Jodha, and after whom the city is known as Jodhpur, which literally means Jodha's city. It's a continuous lineage for 7 centuries, and the current Maharaja Gat Singh Ji is the 39th ruler of Jodhpur, and the fort is the epitome of the history. Mehrangarh, the fort of Jodhpur, came essentially as a defensive architecture, a medieval time which was full of wars and conflicts. Around the 20th century, with the coming of the British, the relative warfares between the dynasties no longer existed. So, the fort as a principal defensive architecture and its use no longer was needed. So, the ruling family then moved to a modern palace which suited the lifestyle of the 20th century.
I think my grandfather was very fascinated by modern technology, and therefore he was one of the first pioneers and produced the airfield in Jodhpur in 1924, the first airstrip, and by 1933 we had international flights coming here. Therefore, when the time came to build a new palace that could deal with the requirement to entertain, to host foreign dignitaries, to host people from other states, a new palace was required. In the process, the construction styles, he must have discovered Art Déco. That was the era, that was something new, that was something exciting. You saw it in the movies, And I think he wanted to make a statement. And so we had the fort on one side and this hill on the other side. And he wanted to do something very special, and yet be modern, yet be Indian. And that, I think was the brief.
The region around Jodhpur, which is called Marwar, which literally means the land of death, because it is signified with constant droughts. And that year too, there were 2 consecutive droughts. And Maharaj Umed Singh Ji, as he was, with a man of great vision, he led this great project of building of the palace with a motive of giving employment to the people.
One of the things that Lancaster had to do, so that the ladies from that side, on the left-hand side, which was the Zanana side, and they could never be seen by anybody, move right around the building, as is now possible. Lancaster had to make passageways. The Maharani and her suite could walk along without being seen and watch from the balconies round those rooms through curtains. The swimming pool in those days was underground, so that the ladies themselves, from their quarters, could go and swim.
The palace itself was quite a conservative undertaking. I mean, it was not ahead of time, style-wise. It is quite amazing if you go through it with this conservative attitude, then you suddenly find yourself in Art Déco rooms.
Dziedzictwo Norblina tu w Indiach było znane naprawdę bardzo wąskiej grupie, która jest zafascynowana nie tylko Indiami, nie tylko Norblinem, ale przede wszystkim wysokiej klasy Art Déco. Norblin nie tylko malował, ale on projektował całe pomieszczenia, projektował pokoje, projektował salę tronową, zajmował się projektowaniem oświetlenia, mebli, detali, także przestrzeni, koloru. Jeżeli chodzi o polonika, bo tak je traktujemy, są najcenniejsze w całej Azji.
The palace was commissioned in 1929, and then soon after that the war years came. A lot of the furniture that was ordered and things, fixtures, never reached, particularly one consignment from Naples, because I think the ship was bombed. But at that time, there was also this exhibition of Norblin in Bombay, where he became known to 3 different princely families who commissioned him for different things. And Jodhpur was one of them.
नमस्ते शरण्ये शिवे सानुकंपे नमस्ते जगत व्यापिके विश्वरूपे.
In Hinduism, the representation of creation, of God, is more celebratory in nature. It's a very individual relationship that people have with the imagery that represents the sacred. And so I think he had a lot of freedom. And so he could concentrate on the artistic content and the artistic representation of those figures rather than worry about the larger circumstance in which they had to be set. And I think from that perspective, he must have realized that. And therefore, it seems beautiful.
Namaste Jagat Vandya Padanavinde Namaste Jagat Tarini Trahi Durge Namaste Jagat Tarini Trahi Durge Namaste Jagat Tarini Trahi Durge.
Jeśli chodzi o Ramajanę, wydaje mi się, że w wypadku Norblina dobrze mówić właśnie o Ramajanie Norblina, bo takie określenie bardzo dobrze wkomponowuje się w tradycyjne funkcjonowanie tej opowieści. W przedstawieniu Norblina widzimy najważniejsze momenty, które zawiązują akcję Ramajany. Czyli na początku mamy turniej, w którym Rama napina łuk boga Siwy. Dzięki czemu zdobywa wtedy jako żonę, bo to jest nagroda dla zwycięzcy konkursu, sitę. Następnie widzimy, moim zdaniem, na pewno jest to para Rama i Sita, szczęśliwa w Ayodhji.
Pratakshanaham bhadramate gamanam prati raghava vanavasasya shurasya charayahi mama rochate.
Potem następuje porwanie Sity przez adwersarza Ramy. Pojawia się na scenie Ravana, porywający żonę Ramy. No i w rezultacie musi dojść oczywiście do odzyskania porwanej Sity. Zanim do tego dojdzie, musi oczywiście dojść do walki i ten epizod również tutaj jest przedstawiony. Następnie para może wrócić do domu, co jest też bardzo piękne, zwizualizowane przez Norblina, kiedy w słynnym powozie boga Kubery cała Sita, odzyskana w tym sensie cała, wraca razem ze swoim małżonkiem do stolicy w Ayodhji. No, niestety, wiele z wersji Ramajany ma smutny koniec i ten moment również, bardzo zresztą charakterystyczny, bardzo ciekawy sposób przywodzący na myśl, może nawet bardziej katolickie niż chrześcijańskie, przedstawienia Marii Panny. Sita, która ginie na oczach swojego męża i synów, zostaje właśnie przez tę ziemię pochłonięta.
सर्वं ते पृष्ठता कृतम्.
In 1944, I was born in Bombay, now Mumbai. I remember my mother telling me that Polish doctors had told her that she could never have children because of some injury during the early part of her career. She would laugh about the change of climate from Poland to India having something to do with her getting pregnant. I'd barely survived malaria at 1 year of age, and we owed thanks to the Maharaja for sending for medicines by private plane. In mid-1946, we left India on the USS General Gordon bound for America. But because of minefields left in the ocean after the war, the ship was rerouted away from New York and docked instead in San Francisco. My parents fell in love with the city and decided to stay. Unfortunately, my father did not have the recognition in America that he had had in Europe. And although he painted several notable works here, we lived quite modestly on very little income. My mother went to school to become a manicurist in a beauty salon, taking care of ladies' nails. Although she told me that she enjoyed the work, it's hard for me to fully understand, knowing that at one time she had been such a great film star. She told me that having a son was enough for her. The war had taken so much away from both of my parents. My father had also developed glaucoma, untreatable at that time. In August of 1952, when I was just 8 years old, fearing oncoming blindness and fearing that he might become a financial burden on my mother and I, my father left a note, drove to a small lake near our home, parked the car, and consumed a bottle of sleeping pills. Stefan Norblin had taken his own life at the age of 60.
Obrazy olejne Stefan Norblin malował na płótnie bawełnianym. To płótno bardzo cienkie, ale dawał zabezpieczenie. Obrazy te, które mają obecnie około 60 lat, uległy znacznym zniszczeniom. Złe warunki w Indiach, jeśli chodzi o wilgotność, również wysokie temperatury, które tu latem dochodzą do 50 stopni Celsjusza.
O skali tego przedsięwzięcia, o stanie rzeczy dowiedzieliśmy się dzięki aktywności ambasadora brytyjskiego. I właśnie on skierował uwagę podczas pierwszej wizyty właśnie tu, Lecha Wałęsy, na to dziedzictwo, które wymagało, krótko mówiąc, prac konserwatorskich i to bardzo intensywnych.
When things improved, economic conditions in Poland improved, we were very lucky and grateful that the Polish Ministry of Art and Culture, they approached us again and said we'd like to do some more. And that's how the project began and is still going on.
Malowidła ścienne, które tu wykonał Stefan Norblin, były w fatalnym stanie. Właśnie w 2006 roku rozpoczęli konserwatorzy ratowanie tych malowideł. W tej chwili nie widać, w którym miejscu były uzupełnienia, kolory są dobrze dobrane. Jeśli spojrzeć na zdjęcia przed rozpoczęciem prac, dopiero widać, w jakim stanie te malowidła były.
Someone told me that they tried to hurry up Stefan Norblin to finish them, but he said, if you hurry me up, they won't stick to the plaster. I mean, they were painted on the plaster. So this is what happened many years later. And interestingly, during all those years, it was forgotten who had painted them. It was not important. When you would ask what was the name, it was Norblin, because he would sign S. Norblin. So and I looked it up. There was no painter Norblin. Huh?
Muszę powiedzieć, że pojawiała się wątpliwość, czy damy radę, czy nam się uda odtworzyć, ale współpraca z jego wysokością maharadżą Jodhpur dawała dobre nadzieje. Jak się okazało, stworzone warunki dla prac konserwatorskich pozwalały rzeczywiście wykonać tę pracę na najwyższym poziomie.
My zaś kochamy ziemię indyjską. Przedmiot myślenia Europy to rzeczy widzialne, kamień i żelazo, liczba i miara. Oto nasza sprawa i wszystko, co w mowie greckiej nazywa się techniką. Ziemia indyjska objawia ukryte tajniki ducha, nam całkowicie nieznane, a które wielce pragniemy poznać. Nadszedł czas, aby Indie, najstarsza siostra plemion aryjskich, została naszym nauczycielem. Zafascynowanie Indiami prowadziło nieuchronnie do ich idealizacji. Indie to jest ta kraina duchowości, odwiecznego spokoju, uzasadniająca powiedzenie ex oriente lux. Z Indii rzeczywiście miała płynąć do nas ta mądrość. Natomiast jeśli chodzi o bardzo silne w ogóle zainteresowanie kulturą indyjską w Europie, nie wahałabym się powiedzieć na świecie, to jest moment, w którym Rabindranath Tagore w 1913 roku dostaje Nagrodę Nobla za Chitraanjali. I Indie w tym momencie, zresztą też dzięki osobie samego Tagora, który bardzo dużo podróżuje i funkcjonuje jako mędrzec ze wschodu, pozyskuje bardzo wiele właśnie osób zainteresowanych kulturą Indii. To są te źródła, z których zapewne w jakimś stopniu Norblin mógł czerpać. Niekoniecznie musiał uświadamiać sobie, prawda, bezpośrednie źródło pochodzenia pewnych myśli. Indie były obecne w myśli europejskiej.
And so ended the journey of two incredibly talented people in 1952 and 1958 respectively. But it did not end there. In 1994, I was invited by Maharaja Gaj Singh II to come to Jodhpur, India, and to partake in the celebrations of the 50th anniversary of the Umaid Balwan Palace. It was a thrill to see the many Norblin murals throughout the palace, some recently restored by Polish conservators. This renewal, this rebirth of interest in my father's artwork is so long overdue. I'm proud to be his son and to share in the legacy of his talents, which he leaves to Poland, India, and to the world.
চিনি গো চিনি তোমারে ও গো বিদেশিনী তুমি থাকো সিন্ধু পারে ও গো বিদেশিনী আমি চিনি গো চিনি তোমারে ও গো বিদেশিনী তুমি থাকো সিন্ধু পারে ও গো বিদেশিনী দেখেছি শারদ প্রাতে তোমায় দেখেছি মাধবী রাতে তোমায় দেখেছি